just a hack. He's just an absolute hack. And he gets his ass kicked by his teammates every week. It's just, it's terrible. It's just terrible.
It feels like it's been an eternity since we've had college football, and finally, the games are back. Now, I know this weekend for FBS action doesn't have a star-studded cast of games. There are no big SEC programs, heck, no big Big Ten programs that are going to be competing for national championships. Instead, we've got a couple fun games sprinkled in. We've got a bunch of FCS matchups that are going to be featured on secondary channels. But if you're a sicko like me and you love college football and you just want to watch some games that actually mean something, you're tired of watching preseason NFL football games, which have been nice, you're excited to watch the games that are going to be being played this weekend. Now, there's a handful of games. There's obviously a much smaller lineup than we typically get. And there's really three that I'm going to be paying attention to the closest. The first being the game that is going to be played in Dublin, Ohio, Nebraska versus Northwestern. The odd thing that I've noticed from this game is that Nebraska has been crowned such a heavy favorite for this one. I think the odds when I placed my bet on this game was some minus 300 something along those lines for Nebraska. Now, depending on the book, that is going to vary, but it was outrageous for a money line bet in favor of Nebraska. And I think most lines right now have it slotted as Nebraska as a 13-point favorite. Now, I don't really understand where Nebraska suddenly coming into this season in which Scott Frost has done everything possibly wrong that he could do for a program that has been on the decline since its last national championship contention. How a team like Nebraska that didn't blow anyone out of the water in recruiting, didn't acquire any massive name recruits in the transfer portal, is suddenly now a 13-point favorite in the first game of the season against Northwestern, of all teams. Nebraska did add Casey Thompson, who is a transfer from Texas. Did not finish the season. There was a competition between him and Hudson Card. But Casey Thompson does have talent and is a quality quarterback. He is a step up from Adrian Martinez, who was their starting quarterback last year. He might be likely a better fit for what Scott Frost is trying to run offensively. That is the big positive, the big improvement for Nebraska. But it's not enough to already be considering them to be a dominant enough team to win their first game of the season by 13 points. What's even more perplexing is that we are willing to consider this Northwestern team bad enough to be a 13-point dog to a bad Nebraska program. Pat Fitzgerald has always produced really good defensive teams. And after a bad season last season, we know that Pat Fitzgerald is a good enough coach to rally the troops, get them back on track. I'm confident that they will be able to handle Casey Thompson and that Nebraska offensive line. Now, there are question marks of who's the starting quarterback for Northwestern. Is it Ryan Hilinski? Is it Brendan Sullivan? But what Northwestern has and has always done is produce really good offensive line play. Peter Skoronski is going to be a first-round draft pick this upcoming year. And Northwestern is going to have a really, really good offensive line coming into this game. All I'm saying is Nebraska should not be considered to be as much of a favorite as they are, and we need to start considering Northwestern to be a much more competitive program in this matchup. The second game, and I know this isn't necessarily an exciting matchup, Wyoming versus Illinois. Last year, Wyoming was actually pretty good. Illinois, in its first year under Brett Bielema, taking some steps, looking sloppy here and there, surprising some teams in some of their games and keeping some games close. But the big contribution that Illinois is adding is going and getting Tommy DeVito, who was previously a highly recruited kid that went on to play at Syracuse. He transfers to seemingly a program that has the same exact uniforms, now suiting up for Illinois. Bielema is a really good coach. Really, really good coach. Now, I'm not saying that Illinois is going to win the Big Ten, but they are a very, very competitive Big Ten program. They are a team that can be towards the middle of the pack under the right leadership, and Bielema is setting them up for that possible situation in his second season this year. Wyoming, though, was a bowl team last season, and they had a lot of talent, particularly Isaiah Neyor, who ended up on Texas through the transfer portal. Neyor is not going to play the season because of a season-ending injury that he suffered. But this Wyoming team is extremely depleted. Illinois is going to knock the doors off of Wyoming in this first game, and we'll have not that entertaining a football in this one, but still a fun matchup that we can at least tune into and watch for the first half of the game until Illinois starts to pull away. The last one I'm really intrigued by, not because of the matchup, but rather because of the implications on one of the head coaches in this game. Vanderbilt's traveling to Hawaii for this first game of the season. They are the last game of the day. I believe it's a 10:30 Eastern time kickoff, 7:30 Pacific time for me. I'm going to be watching this game for sure. Clark Lea is entering his second season as the head coach of Vanderbilt. He previously came from Notre Dame, where he was a dominant defensive coordinator, produced one of the most successful Notre Dame defenses in the history of the program, enough to bring it to the college football playoff. Now they got their butts kicked by Alabama, but still good enough to produce a defense that was competitive enough to reach the college football playoff. Now, I have a lot of faith that Clark Lea can get Vanderbilt back to the competitive level that it once had when James Franklin was there. Franklin, strong coach, has keeping Penn State competitive despite having so many things that it has to deal with playing in the Big Ten, facing teams like Michigan and facing teams like Ohio State, all of these big powerhouses in the Big Ten. I think Clark Lea has that potential to be competitive in the SEC, to no longer be the bottom feeder. The big thing that helps Clark Lea going into his second season is coming from a background, not only being a player from Vanderbilt, but also somebody who coached at a similar type academic standard type institution that has limitations on what players can be a part of the program, on which players can get into school and actually participate. Clark Lea is going to turn this team around, and I think this is going to be the first signs of what they can do. A strong opening victory. I believe they're only a touchdown favorite. They're minus 6.5 point favorite against Hawaii. I understand that you have to travel. It is a completely different climate than you're going to be getting in Tennessee, but you are now in a position after having your first recruiting class, having some time to work on your program, to not only open the season on a good note, but possibly knock the doors off of Hawaii. So I want to see what Clark Lea does. This is an important game because the rest of the schedule is going to be so brutal for Vanderbilt that they need to win as many of these non-conference games as possible and do it in a convincing fashion to build up some momentum so that they can then upset some of these other SEC teams. But I know, folks, it's not exciting. This is not a lineup of games that are – we don't get to see Ohio State, Notre Dame yet. We don't get to see Alabama and Georgia and Oregon and Michigan and all those programs play just yet. But what we do get is the early taste of college football. And I promise you, I'm going to be sitting in front of my couch the entire day. I know that, again, if you're like me and you're willing to sit here and listen to me preview these games, you are just as a sick-minded individual as I am. Enjoy the games. Comment your thoughts below. Maybe your betting picks or picks for these games. If you're not watching any of these three games, and maybe I missed some of them because there are some other fun matchups like North Texas and UTEP. If you're watching any of those games, comment below, let me know. And also make sure you're subscribed to the Hack City YouTube channel so you don't miss out on any of our content that is coming out throughout this season. Enjoy this weekend, folks. We'll be back with more.